Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for staying. So I won't explain how bad the traffic is probably outside. But before I begin my talk, I just want to say that last year I had I don't know if you know, but I got sick last year. So just to let you know, I'm fine. I'm not on any maintenance medicine. I only take vitamins and omega and chia seeds. Okay, so I'm well. All my vitals are okay. Right now, I'm not actively heading exec ed, but I'm teaching. I'm teaching again, and all my vitals are normal, so I'm good. So I'm not hypertensive. So on the record, it's being recorded, broadcast to Facebook. My whole medical record is being broadcast. I hope the other politicians will do the same, right? Okay. So my vitals are normal. I'm not hypertensive. I'm not diabetic. My cholesterol is normal. My potassium is normal. I had 4 MRIs, 2 CAT scans, 2 spinal taps. I have no autoimmune. I have no cancer as of the last time I checked. So I'm good. Okay, so thank you. I just wanted to explain a little bit where I am now in my career here. So I'm with Exec Ed, and as you know, I started off teaching LOB. So for those of you who were in batch 99, 2000, 2001, all the way to 2007, I was their teacher in LOB. You remember your LOB? FM1, FM2, management accounting, management control. I was teaching equity valuation, portfolio management. I was teaching in the CFA program. So my first 10 years at AIM was really in the field of finance. And my mentors and my teachers were, of course, Professor Morato, Felix Bustos, Bobby Roberto. My colleagues were Professor Perez. Whenever he teaches derivatives, I only understand 5 seconds and then I get completely lost. And so on and so forth. So my colleague was the finance people. And then sometime around the currency crisis in 2008, I realized that it was getting very complicated to be in the finance field. And I was also understanding that a lot of companies that failed didn't necessarily fail because their balance sheet was weak, but they failed because they were not so competitive. So I asked permission from the dean at the time to move to marketing, to the marketing department. So for the last 10 years plus, I've been teaching marketing. So my role models, of course, in the marketing department are the likes of Joe Faustino, Joe Miranda, of course, Tommy Lopez. Let's say a prayer for Tommy Lopez. Who else? Ned Roberto, of course. So I was very lucky to have all of those professors. And for our senior leaders here, I'm sure these are the professors that you are familiar with. And my whole journey has taken me through the whole transformation of AIM across generations. So in my 21 years here at AIM, I have seen the best of every single person at AIM, but I've also seen the worst of every single moment. But I'm happy to honestly report to the alumni that from my perspective, that I think over the last couple of years, that we are trending most favorably positive. I think a lot of the work that has been done on the new programs, as Chris presented earlier, on MSDS, MSID, and on ME, these are all very positive, well-received programs. Of course, I can go into a long 2-hour discussion on how I feel about ME, the original ME leaving. So this is okay to talk about in public. And of course, the creation of the new ME. And for me, how I feel about that has evolved over time, and I will explain that as part of my presentation here. Okay? So I just want to say that in my role as a professor in Exec Ed and as also head of Exec Ed, our job really is to help guide the leaders and the managers of these large companies and organizations and communities to manage the transformation that all organizations have to go through because of the technology change that's happening. Okay, how did you feel after listening to Chris's talk? Were you happy or sad? Were you hopeful or fearful? Okay, so all I can say is that because the predominant emotion today among many business leaders is fear and anxiety, the market for executive education in AIM is going to be very strong and deep for the next many, many years. Okay? So demand for our exec ed programs is not the problem. The problem and the challenge is for people like me to ensure that I understand the new technologies. So blockchain is coming, and we need to understand very clearly what is the implication of blockchain on all the new business models will be developed. And the way we look at our role in exec ed is that we always have to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of our clients. So if our clients are from the senior leadership positions of Globe and PLDT and Jollibee and Nestle and Holcim and many, many, many other large multinational and large Philippine and regional companies, we really have to be several steps ahead of them. Okay? And I'm very proud to say that many of our clients come back, they ask for more programs, and the satisfaction seems to be very good. In fact, just to share with you some inside information, some of our clients are asking us, we don't want to hire McKinsey anymore because what do you think is the problem with consulting industry today? They're not as exclusive in terms of what they know, but their prices are very exclusive. Okay, so we have been asked in many cases to replicate the work of foreign global consultancies. And I'm proud to say that given the narrow scale that we have compared to those companies, that I think we've been doing a very good job. So my commitment to all of you as alumni leaders is that myself, hopefully a familiar face for many alumni, that I'm giving my own personal commitment that we will continue to pursue the mission of AIM, and exec ed is an integral part of that. Okay, so our target market is companies and corporations and organizations, providing them with non-degree programs, short programs, that are really designed to be some kind of strategic intervention inside their company. So before I continue, I just want to say that if Chris won the Oscars of Innovation, I won the People's Choice Award for... So this is not an award by peers, this is an award by the people. So I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who voted. Thank you to everybody who prayed for me when I got sick. Thank you to the people who donated money to me when I was sick. The gratitude is very deep, and my commitment to our mission is still very strong. Okay, so I just want to say that the 3 of us are all from Quezon Province, so maybe there's something about the lambalog in Quezon that makes us good people to sit around with after class. But of course, that's Professor Morato in the middle and Professor Jessica Gallegos. Professor Morato was my personal mentor when I was a student. He convinced me to join the faculty. And of course, Jessica Gallegos was asked by WashCC to recruit me as a faculty member. So Jess met with me and asked me and offered me a job. And I left Ayala, and it was a little messy, but I'm here, and I'm very grateful and thankful that I made this decision. Okay? So thank you again for the People's Choice Award. Okay, this is my fear. I'm talking to you as leaders of your organization. I'm talking to you as owners. I'm talking to you as leaders of your community, your church, from all across Asia. And somehow, what I'm worried about is that there's a very big surprise factor that we don't see. There's this line that is kind of linear on the bottom, and as we listen to many speakers, we feel that this is the linear progression of where a company is going to go. So I'll give you an example. Okay. If you believe that all this RPA and AI is going to disrupt a lot of jobs. That's true. Correct? But the question is it going to be as bad as we expect it to be? Is it going to be as worse, or maybe even worse than we expect it to be? Or can it actually be the trigger that helps us reimagine how society should be like, and forces us to reimagine and rethink how work and business and products and services should be done? So now there are suggestions that in a future time, we will only work 15 hours a day, because there's not going to be enough work for everybody to do. So the question will be, where will the rest of our livelihood come from? So there are ideas called UBI, Universal Basic Income, so that as long as you're a citizen of a country, that country will give you some kind of income. So what I'm worried about is that as leaders, we're taking in all this information that's given to us, and we're accepting the diagnosis as it's being presented to us. And the title of my talk actually is Asian Emergence, because emergence alludes to or points to new trends or new behaviors that reflect how individuals self-organize themselves into new organizations and new relationships so that they can create new values or new behaviors. Okay. So if you ask me, hell is really going to happen if we allow the technology change to occur and we do not change the way we run our business. Hell is going to happen if we allow the changes to occur but we do not change the structure or the business model of our current business. So the call to action actually is to be more self-aware that there is a line that could be much better and could actually be exponential. Okay. So what is emergence? Okay, so very quickly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this part, but it's really that in times of difficulty, new behaviors, new patterns, and new properties will emerge within the system. Okay, we need new ways of coping with the external stressors that is making our lives difficult. So I'll be honest with you. One part of me wants the traffic problem in Manila to be solved, but the other part of me does not want the traffic problem to be solved. Because I want the traffic problem to push the system into chaos. And I want the system to reorganize itself along new emergent lines and trends. And if you're an entrepreneur, and you're not invested in the status quo, meaning you're not making money from the current status quo of the structure of the industry, then you would say that, yeah, let's let the system collapse, right? And I, as an entrepreneur, or as a leader, will find new opportunities to create new emergent trends, patterns, behaviors, products, or services. So for me, it's very obvious when I watch TV or I listen to people speak. Of course, those who talk about protecting the status quo are probably those whose motivations are protected by protecting the status quo. And those who are advocating for rapid change, of course, those who believe that they will have an opportunity to participate more in the economy if the system actually radically changes. Now, I've always believed that AIM is like the queen of business schools. Queen as in Queen the band. Did you watch the movie? Did you remember how they explained Queen? Why Queen was so appealing to people? Because Queen was the band for the misfits. Queen was the band for those who didn't exactly fit in. And if you ask me, of course I can say on one side, most of the alumni of AIM is not necessarily heavily invested in the status quo. But you can argue, of course, from a different perspective, let's say from a different school's perspective, that AIM is the status quo. So everything is relative and relevant. But for us, what is our perspective? Okay? Are we willing to take a bigger role in the creation of the new status quo? Are we willing to take our role in the weakening of the existing structure? Because the existing structure has its pluses. All the good things that have happened is because of the existing structure. But all the bad things that are happening is also because of the existing structure. So we only have two decisions to make as leaders. Defend the status quo or seek change. Of course, many people will say, sir, it depends. It's not mutually exclusive, and that's true. We can do our part to defend the status quo, and then on the other hand, explore how the new emergent system is going to come. Okay? So I'm very curious about the self-organization. If you notice at the last line it says, it doesn't need control by an external agent. You don't need the government to always be orchestrating self-organizing activities. Right? Us, as capitalists, okay, even the development brothers and sisters here, I think, you can say that you're semi-capitalist because you went to a semi-business school and a semi-development school. But what I'm trying to say here is that basically for me, self-organization involves hacking the status quo. We need to hack how the current system operates. We need to find ways to reorganize ourselves so that we can find a tenable, defensible, valuable, profitable position. Okay, so in our website, here's the line, at the heart of an ever-changing Asia. My challenge to all the AIM leaders this afternoon is really, how deeply do we internalize this idea? How differently do we really look at Asia? Or do we still view Asia along the lines of the traditional power structure, along the lines of the traditional economic structures? And in that context, if we're able to reimagine how we understand Asia and where the opportunities lie, and where the power structure really lies. For example, if you feel that the Philippines is always at a disadvantage from a negotiating point of view, then maybe we need to reassess really and ask ourselves, are we really at a disadvantage compared to many of our neighboring countries? Are we really in a weak position when it comes to negotiating deals that will benefit parties in the long term? I can argue from a very simple point of view, from a purely demographic point of view, that time is on our side. Time is on the side of the countries that have the younger demographic. So if I look at traditionally more developed areas of Asia, like North Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, or if I look at China, which is the largest chunk of Asia, and if I look at several countries inside Southeast Asia, okay, not all countries in Southeast Asia, by the way, have a very young demographic. The more advanced countries actually of Southeast Asia have an older demographic. So I would point to countries like Singapore and Malaysia, where their demographics is already skewed, getting a little older. The average age in Malaysia is getting higher, whereas in countries like Philippines, India, Indonesia, the demographics are still very young. So how is this going to have an impact on our leverage and our negotiating positions moving forward? Okay. So my challenge to all of us, including myself, is if we want to be relevant in 2019 and beyond, we cannot use tired stereotypes of what Asia is all about. We cannot use old stereotypes about our neighbors. Okay, we have to let go. And I'm going to talk about that more in a bit, about how are we going to let go of all of these thoughts so that our future can avoid that surprise. So of course, one of my favorite slides, Alvin Toffler, we really need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And as a part of Exec Ed, my commitment to the alumni has been Exec Ed also aims to be your consistent, continuing, trusted, reliable partner to help upskill and upgrade everybody. So this conference this afternoon is really intended to be a free, which is rare these days, a free, quick discussion, and we're showing everything. You know, we're not hiding any slides. We don't have like a free version and a paid version. All my slides here are part of the paid version, but I'm lovingly giving it to all of you. Okay, so we're very interested in helping our alumni relearn, because that's also part of us being relevant to you on a continuing basis, and we want to build that relationship with you very sincerely. There's no point in meeting a co-alumni that speaks somewhere and the talk is a little old or a little aged. We might as well pull that alumni aside and say, brother, sister, maybe you need to come with me and let's have a conversation about how we can update and change the way we see the world. You understand? Okay. By the way, my expectations for all of you are much higher than normal people. You're not normal people. Okay, so I recommend this author. I'm sure you've heard about him because he's been on TV lately a lot. But I recommend this author, Param Khanna, Indian. He's a historian, economist, researcher. And he wrote several books. This is one of his books, Connectography. He also has another book, The Future is in Asia. But if you look at this, the bright part there, it shows the concentration of population. Okay. And the prediction is that the global population will level off at about 10 billion. And by the time the global population levels off at 10 billion, Asia will constitute 2/3 of that. 6.5 billion people. Okay? Now the way to understand Asia is to look at it in terms of the waves of development. So the first wave of development was Japan. Then the second wave of development was North Asia, which is basically Korea and Taiwan. And then you had China. Okay? Now, basically what's happening is that those countries are already hitting their growth peaks, they're maturing, they're slowing down, their demographics are getting older, the industries need to be upgraded. Okay? So now you can hear talks about China going into biotechnology, semiconductors more, higher value semiconductors. So China is trying to move up the ladder the same way Korea did and the same way Japan did, but they have to do it at a much larger scale. But basically what this means is that for the rest of Asia, Southeast Asia and South Asia, this is our time. This is our time. Okay? If you wanted to be part of the second wave or the third wave, but we didn't make it, for sure we're going to be part of the fourth wave, hopefully. Okay? And to seize the opportunity of this wave, we really need a lot of leaders who have a more open mindset towards how the future structure will be made. Okay? So if you notice, the US has perhaps, the population is, I think, a little bigger than Indonesia or a little smaller than Indonesia. But the GDP is huge. Right? So the productivity of the US is still very high, and that's concentrated mostly on the West Coast and the East Coast. But if you look at Asia, and if you look at like Manila, Philippines is there on the edge. We have high population, but our GDP is still relatively small. So two things, from a productive capacity point of view, and from a consumption point of view, we have the potential. We have the opportunity. And if I just remember the lesson that Professor Morato taught me as a young MBA student, right? The responsibility to create something of value and to create productivity is the responsibility of the leader-manager and not of the workers. The workers will follow, but the leaders have to direct, and the managers have to manage. So this is our time. And I just want to make sure that having been managing companies in a region that might have been thought of as the sick region, or the sicker region, or the weaker region, now is the time to actually change all of that. Now, if you look at it, and if you heard Poch's talk earlier, political boundaries are not as significant as they used to be. Now it's all about the resources and how the resources will be concentrated. And if you notice here, most of the megacities by 2030 will be in Asia. I think more than 30 of the world's top megacities will be in Asia. And right now, if you see, and I'll just refer to, if you look at India, for example, India has, of course, several there. China has more. China actually has the fastest growing megacities. Okay. India has the large megacity. Philippines is there. Philippines is the largest Southeast Asian megacity, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, Manila. That's 12 million in 2014. That's just Manila. If you add the plus 5 million of the greater area, so that's about 60 million. And in 2030, it's projected to be about 17 million. Okay? Look, I'll be honest with you. The way Manila is designed now is not going to cut it for 17 million people. Right? So if we're going to sit around feeling sorry for ourselves because technology and robots are going to take over, that's, I think, the mistake that leaders cannot take. Because ultimately, the hopelessness of society because of disruption has to be countered by the optimism of our leaders. Right? And what frustrates me most about our leadership today, especially in government, etc., is that their inability to articulate a clear, hopeful future for people is what's, I think, pushing people into hopelessness. And we see that suicide rates are increasing, depression rates are increasing. So I think there's a clear need for us to address many of the leadership aspects of our role, not just the managerial aspects. So, I'm very excited because I asked Greg, how many countries are represented today in the audience? And he said about 10. Now, I think from what we understand in terms of how resources are being mapped, is that economic growth will be created with more connections. And when we talk about connections, it can be rail, for example. So Belt and Rail, Belt and Road is a big project because it's going to create connections. Philippines, of course, can only connect to that via sea or via air. So our air industry, our air transport industry, and our sea transport industry on the physical side is critical. Our telco industry and our IT-enabled industries are going to be critical for the service delivery side so that we can be connected more deeply into our surrounding neighbors. I'll give you an example. For the Philippines, is it possible that in the near future, many markets for healthcare workers will open in the North Asian region, like Japan, China, and Korea? And my guess is that, yes, that's going to be a very big market. So if I was a leader in the healthcare industry today, I mean, when I look at them, sometimes I just wonder, are they just fighting over several hospitals inside the Philippines? Has the list become that short? Maybe there's a need for us to reimagine the boundaries of our business towards the markets that really need a lot of healthcare services. Of course, we do need it, but the reality is many other countries out there also need it very badly. And that's what inspires me every day. For people who are worried about selling something, yeah, I understand. But the reality is the demand for so many services is so big, the capacity is the real problem in many sectors. And the willingness of investors to invest in building capacity is the issue as well. So connections. So my suggestion, of course, is for the AIM Alumni Federation to perhaps take a lead in identifying new ways to create connections with new and different nodes throughout the Southeast Asian and South Asian network. Okay? So if you remember being in AIM and you were sitting down this poolside drinking with your Indonesian classmate, your Malaysian classmate, your Indian classmate, your Filipino classmate, these are the countries that need to be even more connected today because we're in this growth wave today. So you just revive all the old drinking sessions. And of course, we have a clear guide in terms of where investments need to be poured in. It's not like we have to reinvent and determine which industries need the most help. So it's laid out already. We don't need to reinvent where we need to be. From a market selection, industry selection, geographic market selection perspective, all the ingredients for doing great and becoming very big are already here in our region. Okay? I hope that the leaders of the AIM Alumni Association can see this as an opportunity to have a new and fresh discussion that is unique to our community. By the way, I was talking to people from NUS, and I was talking to some people from India who were into the e-learning systems. And they were saying that some e-learning providers in India preferred to partner with AIM than NUS. And the reason was because they said AIM has more Indian alums in their MBA program than NUS, which I was surprised to find out the comparison. So there is a unique, deep connection actually between those two communities. And yet I believe that we have not really invested as much time maybe as we need today to find those new connections between those two countries. And let's just say this, okay? So what if an air flight was scheduled between Delhi and Manila several years ago and it failed? That was several years ago. Our mindset today is maybe we need to revisit and rethink all of these things. Just because it failed 5 years ago doesn't mean it was a bad idea. All it means is that maybe the timing of that idea was a little too early. Okay, so we're heavily involved in helping companies develop strategies for both sustaining innovation and disruptive types of innovation. So we're very clear about the difference, and we're very sensitive to the needs of the senior leadership of companies, because for many companies, especially the incumbents, they don't like the word disruptive innovation because they're not invested in the new, they're invested in the existing. So I'll just say very, very bluntly that the left side is the innovation strategy that incumbents in the industry will adopt to protect their position. And the right side is the investment strategy that will be adopted by the startups and the disruptors so that they can overcome the status quo in the industry. And I'm very proud to say that the faculty of AIM in general has had a lot of experiences working with different groups in both areas. So when I say that we work with both telcos at the same time, Globe and PLDT, on both types of innovation. We work with all three cement companies at the same time on both types of innovation. We work with Jollibee in a very big way. We've sent hundreds of people here, and they're really trying to become one of the world's largest branded eat-out companies in the world. So I'm very confident about what we've achieved, and I'm very confident about the expertise that we've built in both of these spaces. And a lot of the validation that we've received has really come from the market and from our competition. So a lot of our competitors come to AIM asking for partnership. Can we just partner? Can we just not compete anymore for the account? We'll just work together, etc., etc., etc. So I'm very proud to report that in relation to these types of innovation, strategies, and processes, we have a good number of faculty who have a good amount of experience doing work. And we're connected to the open source. Okay, so we work with IdeaSpace, we work with DOST, so we benchmark a lot of the work that we do with other organizations. Okay, so I'll give you one quick example, maybe something we didn't study way back when we were in MBA. So design thinking. So this is the new idea. So this is susceptible to the hype cycle. Okay, so the question is design thinking still in hype, or it's already at a point where it's really going to contribute real business results? And well, basically what this is that it's a combination of empathy for the human condition, but at the same time combining it with the creativity of a problem solver and the rationality of an MBA minded type of investor. Okay, so it's like three things. Somebody who's going to empathize with people, to understand the problem. Somebody who has creativity and knowledge of technology to find the solution. And then number three is the mindset, the investment mindset that understands the investment risks and how to manage that investment risk. Okay. So design thinking actually, I think this is very hard to automate. Okay. If there's enough signees, great, we can run a special design thinking course just for alumni, we can do that. Okay, just to upgrade everybody. But from a graphical point of view, this is what it is. It's very simple. So cognitively, it's not difficult to understand, but skills-wise, it needs practice so that you can behave and think properly. Okay, so this is not complicated. It just needs practice so that you can practice it properly and think properly. Okay. So the first one is sensing the gap. And if I talk about sensing the gap in the context of sustainable development goals, there's a lot. Healthcare, education, justice, women's empowerment, children's protection, so on and so forth. So there's a lot. Nutrition, health and wellness. Okay. So day in, day out, here at AIM, we have people just talking about the gaps in all of those SDGs. To be honest with you, my life at AIM is so blessed because I'm not surrounded at all by toxic people. I'm surrounded every day by people who are trying to understand problems and trying to find a solution. It's a very optimistic place to be in every day. Okay, I think that's why I got well faster. Okay. So we go through this, and a lot of what we do now revolves around transforming managers to facilitate and participate collaboratively in this process. Okay, this one, Greg, how much time do I have? 2 minutes? Okay, I think this is important, okay? Many of us came to MBA or whatever program we came to because we studied the lower right-hand side, the best practice. So we came here and we studied EQM. We came here and we studied Michael Porter. And Michael Porter said there's only two generic strategies, just differentiation and low cost. Then he said, here's the value chain. It applies to everybody. Here's the diamond model. It applies to everybody.
Hello.
Okay. So we have many generations of managers that went to B school that was trained in what we call best practice. And they were trained to manage a problem that we call a simple problem. What does simple problem mean? Simple problem means the relationship between cause and effect is clear and reliable and known. Okay, so I'll give you an example. In the old days, you're an FMCG company, you wanted to increase sales. What was the answer? Spend more money for advertising. So for many years, that model worked. In fact, it grew a whole industry, the ad industry, the broadcast industry, the print industry, the radio industry. All of these industries was built on the certainty that if FMCG companies advertise, their sales will increase and they'll keep on coming back to advertise for more. Right? So in the old days, the rule was share of voice equals share of market. So you want 10% market share, spend 10% of the ad spend in your industry. But what happened over time? That relationship did not hold. I would spend my 10% and then I wouldn't get my 10% market share. And then the marketing people will say, maybe we need to change the agency. Okay, then they'll wait another year, they'll invest again, banging on the same rule, and then it still didn't work, then they say maybe we have to change the endorser. Okay. And then on the third year when it didn't work, the boss said, I think we have to change the marketing manager. Okay? Now where are we now? How do I reach my customer? How do I influence them? It's no longer a simple problem because the means of communication has become so complicated that it's very difficult to predict the return on investment on your marketing activity. Okay? Now there's only two other ways to treat it from a managerial point of view. If the tried and tested formula did not work, does not work anymore. You remember if you work for a branded multinational FMCG, they'll just give you the book. You have to study the book, and regardless of which country you were in, whether you were in Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, it was almost the same book, just a different language. The same formula, the same methodology. Global best practice. So in short, what I'm telling you today is trash global best practice when it doesn't work. So we need to know which best practice today still works and which best practice today doesn't work, and I need to be aware of. If it doesn't work, then I need to treat it differently. Okay, either I treat it like a complicated problem, and treating it like a complicated problem simply means I'm going to hire a consultant. So this is the reason why consulting companies grew. Because companies hired consultants and experts to treat what used to be a simple problem and now to treat it as a complicated problem. So when I was being disrupted by a startup, I hired a consultant. Okay? Now if that still doesn't work, what's your only option? You move to the left side. Okay, the left side is what we call the unordered side, meaning there's a level of unordered. I won't say disorder, it's unordered, meaning I don't know what to do. And you have two options there. Treat it like a complex problem or treat it like novel practice. Now, novel practice example is like EJK. EJK is like novel practice, meaning I think there's a problem, extrajudicial killing, right? Okay. I think there's a problem, and then we'll just do something and we'll see what happens. Okay? Meaning, I'm not going to analyze it first. I'm just going to act. And then we're going to see what happens. Okay? The other one, of course, is on top. Probe first, then sense, and then respond. Meaning, if you read it, the relationship between cause and effect only happens after the fact. What that box is really saying is that you have to prototype the new solution first, test the prototype, and then based on the results of the prototype testing, see whether there's a relationship between what you are trying to do and the outcome you are trying to look for. Okay? So for example, do wearable fitness trackers really change the behavior of people? Will people really exercise more and eat more healthily if I wear a fitness tracker? That was a hypothesis, right? So there was a startup that was created. So now, after so many years of that, can we now conclude that if I wanted to get healthier and lighter, I could just buy a fitness band? Well, if you look at the sales of fitness bands, the answer is probably no. Right? That solution has been proven to not be a complete solution for that kind of problem. Okay. So, you can research this further, but my question here really is, as leaders and managers of our organization, how high a level of self-awareness do we have when we're trying to address different types of problems in our organization? Okay. I won't go into this deeply. I will just say that one of the tools that we use, and this is an open source tool, which is the business model canvas. We use it as a tool for innovation to not only create new products and services, but to create the new business models wrapped around those products and services. Okay. Now the reason why I show this is because this is open source, meaning many organizations use the same tool so that if we interact with those organizations, we're using the same tool. Okay. So any time that you spend studying this is worthwhile, and there are many videos online, and there are many free things online. I would invite you to come here to practice using this with us. So how we would build it, etc. So that the actual teaching of what it is, Google can do that better already. But the practice of how to use this as a tool for innovation, that's what we're very good at here. We also need to understand new innovation processes. So how do I build a portfolio of new innovative business models? How do I explore new ideas? Then of course on the upper right hand box, how do I know which new business models to invest in? Okay. So this takes a portfolio perspective. For startups, we have what we call a hypothesis-driven, iterative, based on the scientific method, way of determining and finding out which startup meets Joe Magsay's expectation. Meaning he wants, what does Joe want? High growth, hyper growth types of startups, explosive growth. But it doesn't happen overnight, right? Explosive growth startups emerge only after a long period of ideation and testing. And there's a lot of evidence already that points to the fact that this can be hypergrowth. Okay? So all of the processes here, and the mindsets, and the leadership required, and how to manage the investors, and the talent, we have that kind of conversation here every single day. Okay? And we also do that conversation in the Dado Banato incubator on the other side. Now, not only are we innovating products and services, but today, even myself, I have to also be what we call an organizational designer. Meaning we have to go into innovating how organizations are designed, because the reality is the resources available to us is changing, right? We can't run companies the same way we used to run them. So here, okay, of course, it's driven first by strategy on top. And then we talk about structure. How can we redesign structure? People, how can we attract and identify the right people? Processes and rewards. Okay. One company that I'm very interested in, and hopefully we can work with them in the future, is this company called Task Us. And they are the BPO to the fastest growing unicorns in the US. And they told us, if you're going to be the BPO to a unicorn, you have to be more innovative and faster and more agile than the unicorns. And they have many offices here. And what's interesting, for example, in their case, is that all the managers' #1 KPI is employee satisfaction. Higher than sales, higher than productivity, higher than cost. So I will just say this right now. You may want to consider that if your first response to an event is to cut cost, which is perhaps what we studied a lot when we were back in the 90s, then today I will question whether that's the correct response or not. Okay? There's a company that we're working with, they're having difficulty because their industry is having some difficulty. Their profits are going to be below target, and the announcement made by the CEO was that they will postpone moving into the new office. And the conversation turned to, if I was in that person's position, is that the correct response to communicate to my company? That we're being challenged by the market, by the industry, and my strategic response to you is, let's not move into the new office. Okay? It might be a necessary response, but it's probably not a sufficient response. I mean, there has been more to than just, I'm not going to spend more money. There has to be an answer as to how can I be more competitive or how can I be more relevant. Okay. We need to build the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Okay, so I'm putting out all these topics for the AIM leaders. How can we contribute to the building of a stronger entrepreneurial ecosystem? I'll just make one direct comment here. What really needs to be addressed is the size and the quality of the investors in entrepreneurial ventures. We need to have a deeper understanding of the real risk that investors are being exposed to. We need to reimagine the way entrepreneurs and startups can acquire resources. Because I think based on the current way this industry is working, that for many companies, access to resources is still very elusive. And it's very hard to grow a lot of these startups. Okay? So I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just trying to say that a rethink is in order. Okay? We have to move away from a value chain mindset to a business ecosystem mindset. Never before has it been easier to create partnerships across different companies, across different industries, across different countries. For many of us, we have to abandon the old notion that everything that we do to deliver the product or service has to be in-house, part of an internal value chain. We need to focus on the activities that we're very good at and collaborate with other companies so that we can match their strengths with our strengths. Okay, so a mindset of partnership is critical. And I think a network like the AIM Leaders Assembly and the AIM Alumni Network in general is necessary if more and more partnerships are going to be formed. Okay? And here are the dimensions of all of these different partnerships. Shared strategy, level of openness, who will be the participants from each company, how do we build relationships across companies, how do we exchange value. When we talk about exchange value, this is something like, do I pay you a fixed fee for every transaction that you do for me? Or do I give you a commission? Do I give you a percentage? Do we share the risk? Do we share the gain? Okay, that's what value exchange means. Okay? We have many students in the ME who are suppliers to very big brands. Okay, I'm going to be very careful here because this is on Facebook Live. But basically what they keep on telling us, the reason why they come to AIM to study as ME students is because their relationship with their principal is so suffocating and so toxic that if they make one mistake, their company will go under. And from their perception, they are basically financing the operations of their principal. And I allude to that simply as an indication of how some partners feel about their relationship with their big principals. So if you're running a big company and you have many suppliers, it might be a nice time to rethink about how can I build more meaningful, stronger, agile, resilient relationships with my key suppliers and not try to maximize the gain all the time. Okay? You might maximize the gain, but it's possible that you're reducing the resilience of your supplier base or the loyalty of your supplier base. Okay, so we're almost at the end, and I will just say that one thing that we always emphasize to all of the new graduates of Exec Ed is the need for self-awareness, or what we call metacognition. Thinking about thinking. We always think about how we think. So every time I stand up or I sit down in front of a group of people, before I start talking, I turn on my metacognition and I ask myself, what is the appropriate type of thought process, thinking process, approach, behavior that I need to show in this time to maximize the value of this meeting with this person? Okay. So we cannot just rely on habits. Okay. We cannot just rely on one style. We have to have multiple styles and multiple approaches to it. Okay, so self-knowledge, self-awareness of how and why we think as we do, and the ability to adapt and learn are critical to our survival as individuals. Now, one thing I keep on telling all my students, and some of you might still remember, is as a professor, I've really taught or tried to be a non-judging person. Because I think in today's world, especially with the younger generation, once you have this tone of being judgy, then the relationship kind of falters. Okay? So it doesn't mean that I'm non-judging. It doesn't mean that I'm going to give away everything. Right? It just means that I approach the conversation with an honest heart, with an open mind, and I will not react and I will not judge immediately. I will listen and try to understand what is the underlying motivation behind this person's behavior. And I will try to extend that for as long as possible and wait until I really need to make a decision about whether I will continue to engage or not before I make the judgment. Okay. I think this is a necessary skill today. I think that if you believe that people have no choice but to do business with you, and they will put up with all of our biases, etc., then that might be less and less true as days go on. Okay. Now, what's wrong with this diagram? So I'm going to end with this topic. What's wrong with this diagram? Linear, meaning what? Which implies that the future, how would you describe this? The future Well, the future happens first, then the present, then the future. Okay, there's a line, right? So the question here is, what is this implying? Is it implying that the future is determined by the present and the past? Meaning, what happened in the past is the reason why I'm here today, and whatever I do today will have an impact on what will happen tomorrow. Okay. And I will argue that this is not correct. Meaning, the better way to think of it is just to look at them as three different things, three different phases. But that, so I have a saying here, all time affects all time, all the time. Okay, so you can Google that, it's not my original. Okay, just in case somebody's watching. All time, meaning all of these three, affects all of the other three all the time. Meaning, how I see the future might change the way I feel about the past. How I see the future might change the way I define the meaning of what happened in the past. And how I define the future is what's going to influence the present. So it's the reverse, right? Instead of saying what I do in the present will influence the future. Actually, it's the reverse. How you see the future is what's going to influence the behavior today. But I'll just say, as from one alum to another alum, like as if we were just classmates at the swimming pool. But if you have a lame vision of the future, then you're gonna make lame decisions today. Right? But if you have a deep, 6K resolution, vision of the future, and you reimagine the kinds of relationships people can have with one another, and you can reimagine the kinds of work days people can have with one another, and so on and so forth, then that's going to have an influence on your decisions today. Meaning, if you expect the same result in the future, you'll probably just make the same decision today, right? But Kanefin tells us that relationship is no longer true. Okay? So all time affects all time, all the time. So something that might happen today might change the way I feel about the past. Right? So I could hear somebody that I could have been very angry with today, and I found out, wow, okay, I didn't know that was the reason why you did that. I didn't know that's why you left me 20 years ago. I didn't know that's why you decided to break up with me and marry that other person, or whatever. Or I didn't know I didn't understand why you fired me at the time, or whatever. Or why you broke up our business partnership, or whatever. So, and this has something to do with judging. Let's not be tied too deeply into our own stereotypes about things. And I think this goes well also with Poch's message. Let's say in relation to other countries. Let's not be too tied with our own stereotypes about other countries. Let's be more open and let's revisit everything in 2019, 2020 and ask ourselves, what's the right thing to do today so that our tomorrow can be a lot better. Okay, so here's some of my call to actions for everyone, as if I was a professor assigning an assignment. Develop a higher level of metacognition. Find exercises and ways to be more aware of how you're thinking and how you're feeling. If you need some kind of dialogue partner, then find a dialogue partner. Ask them, please tell me if I'm behaving this way. I might not be aware. Right? Number 2, internalize the meaning of ever-changing Asia as we talk about in our website. Right? Ever-changing Asia, but if your stereotype is still a 1980s or a 1990s stereotype, then it's not changing. So I beg all of you, please, right? Perhaps we're not as good as we think we are, but at the same time, we're not as bad as we think we are. And I think that holds true for everybody. Number 3, don't have a lame vision for the future. Have a big vision for the future of our children, our children's children, other people's children. Become more human-centric. I will connect that to the talk of Felipe, that today Being purely profit-centric, product-centric, might win you in the short term, but it might be difficult to be sustainable in the long term. Now, the fifth one I think is critical, especially in this time of VUCA. Which one do you think is more important? To be sure about the future or to be clear about your guess about the future? Clarity or certainty? Okay, so what we need to practice is our ability to articulate clearly the things I do not know. Right? Because there are a lot of things we do not know. But we need to be clear about how we explain this. Our leadership is based on our ability to communicate this vision that we have for the future. So clarity. Be clear. Invest time in choosing the right words. Invest time in creating the right message. Okay? Don't assume people will understand. 6, develop emergent practices. Build prototypes. Okay? So if you want to do 3-day work weeks, then prototype a 3-day work week, and then the other day time they can spend at home, and let's see. Right? Because the old relationship was the more time in the office, the more productivity. But today that might be the reverse. The more time in the office, maybe lower productivity. So maybe if we reduce the time in the office, but make them wear horse blinders, and no social media in the office maybe, but only 3 days a week, maybe that's an experiment worth doing to see whether that's a best practice. Now, if you hire people and say, I'll pay you a full month's salary, but you just have to go to the office 3 times a week, will you be more competitive in the labor market? Of course. People want that, right? So that we have time to fly to Siargao and Boracay. Okay? And of course, last one, understand which mistake you're willing to make. I call this the Goldilocks Rule. Everybody should have a Goldilocks Rule. Goldilocks, right? The story of Goldilocks. She was hungry, she was in the woods, she saw the house, she entered the house. She went to the kitchen. The first bowl of porridge was too hot. The second bowl was too cold. The third bowl was just right. She got sleepy, she went to the bedroom. The first bed was too hard. The second bed was too soft. The third bed was just right. As leaders and managers, we always pray and hope that all of our decisions will be just right. But the reality is, it's not going to be just right. It's either going to be too hot or too cold, too hard or too soft. So the best thing we can do is ask ourselves, between those two mistakes, which mistake am I willing to make? And live with it. Stand by that decision. Explain to people, I'm willing to overspend on this and not underspend. Or, I'm not willing to overspend on this. I would rather underspend on this. But stand by it. Give them clarity. Let your people know, if we are to make a mistake, this is the mistake I would rather that you make. But under no circumstance should you make this mistake. Okay? So that's my last one there. Okay, so on that note, it's already late, sorry.
Well, it's been a long day, but we will conclude with a few questions to drill down on the so many things that Richard had shared. We have invited also a couple of AAA awardees, the alumni. So I'd like to call to the stage the first AAA awardee, who is an alumna from Indonesia, Dr. Kartika Antono. Let's give her a round of applause. She is the head of the agro-business firm of the Salim Group and MM89. Well, the second AAA awardee had been delayed by a flight. He had just come in and missed the entire talk of Richard. So I'll take one for the team and take his place.
Thank you for the opportunity to elaborate further about your presentation. It is very interesting that looking at the emergence of Asia, and with several challenges in different countries has different challenges. I would suggest one thing is that more point to be addressed. This will be the sustainable business, because now it's not only the ROI or not only all the figures, but we also have to care about the society, about the sustainable of the business. If I look more specific on the agriculture business, that in some countries in Asia facing a lot of challenges, that is a different strategy has to be made, and in a different time, in the right time. So this is the biggest challenge that we have to face.
This is a big debate in MBA today, because in my mind, and maybe it's because I'm not a very young alum, so I also know what AIM was like before. So my dilemma, maybe I'll just throw up the question to everybody, is sometimes students talk about sustainability, but the role of being competitive versus sustainability, or whether we should actually describe it that way, that it's a choice between being competitive and being sustainable, or of course, being competitive and sustainable, like in the triple bottom line. That really requires a lot of learning from the leaders, how to balance the trade-offs between being more sustainable and being more competitive. Hopefully not all the decisions will be like that. Hopefully, and honestly, that's the problem now with business, right? The problem now with some businesses is that it's an either-or trade-off. Either I make a decision that will help me be more competitive but less sustainable. But I'll do it because I have to be competitive. So how that issue evolves, I will not say that I have a monopoly on that or a very, very well crafted message around that. But what I do know is that we do have to be competitive. Okay, so how to balance sustainability, I think, is honestly, if the investors tell us, okay, I'm going to invest money in you and make some money or make this money, but I need you to be sustainable, I think that's easier for the managers to figure out. I think the problem is when the manager has to balance between an investor who just wants profit and a group of stakeholders that want sustainability. I think that's where the problem happens. So maybe we have to talk to our alums in the finance sector to understand how we can. And I think that was basically the topic of Felipe earlier when he talked about sustainable financing. But I agree. The world is not getting bigger, but the population is getting bigger.
And one more issue is about the human resources. Because if you look at the gap between the senior management and the young generation, which is the millennials, that want everything to be instant and fast. So it's another challenge that you have to address as well.
Okay, ma'am. I will pretend to be a teacher anyway. But you just did some judging. So when you say millennials want everything instant and fast. So I apologize, I'm using you as an example. But I will slap you on the wrist and say, aha, increase your metacognition. Were you being judging when you said that millennials want everything immediate and fast? Okay, so what am I trying to say? My own experience working with millennials is that if you give them the right direction, and if you give them the right explanation of the parameters of the job, that they will apply 100% of themselves to the job. But it requires a lot of hand-holding at the beginning, admittedly. You have to explain in more depth. So there's basically already a science as to how to engage with millennials. Okay? But this is our challenge. My advocacy as an individual is to promote understanding between diverse sets of people, including baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. So I'm not taking sides, it's just that I'm just trying to say that we just have to approach, because we also don't want millennials judging baby boomers. We don't want them to say, ah, you're closed-minded, you're stuck in the past, you have no hope. Because that's what they say sometimes, right? But I would tell them exactly the same thing. Don't judge these people. Don't judge the boomers just because they have white hair. Like, you have to listen to them. You have to understand where their heart is, what they're trying to do, etc. This is what our world needs. Our world needs more understanding, and hopefully it can start, let's say, at business school or here at AIM. How do we create more? In fact, if that could be the theme of the alumni for the next year or so, just even if it's not solution focused, if it's just focused on building understanding, that's already a big, let everybody else create the solution. The alumni will just focus on the understanding part.
Let me chime in here. Your talk, coming as it did at the end, for me, humbled me, challenged me, also made me hopeful, all at the same time. I couldn't understand it. What I was trying to see is, we thought of having a conference like this, free for all alumni, because somehow we needed a 2.0, a 3.0, we needed an upgrade. We know we need it, and we took the opportunity during this homecoming week to listen to all the thought leaders of the school, including your good self, and therefore for us to, to benchmark, to see where it's at. So that's very humbling. Like you were saying, the stuff that we learned, I graduated in '83, so it's like really passé. This 1.0, industry 4.0, you know? And you couldn't understand the terms anymore. So it is very humbling. But why am I also challenged? We take up your call in terms of saying that what is required is connection. This is something that the alumni network understands at our gut level. We don't know why we network, we don't know why we want to build relationships, but we do. And sometimes, or a lot of times, some good comes out of it. Like this conference is one such output. So by being together, and I think that the AIM alumni has that advantage in that we have a multicultural understanding from day one that we started at school, which we believe in there are 10 country chapters here. We continue to work on that understanding, because you're correct. I agree with you that we cannot abide by the 80s understanding of country X, country Y, or country Z. As we go around the region, as airfares have afforded us to go more and fellowship more, to learn more about Vietnam, about China, about Thailand, India, Bangladesh, etc., Indonesia. So the understanding grows, and the need to find common ground also grows. And that's what happens when we network. It just happens. We don't know why, but there is value in, and I'm also plugging that the rest of us here, alumni, who do not network beyond your batch, that is a suboptimal existence. Pathetic when we have a network of 43,000 all over the globe. And I've seen some really incredible alumni all over the place. This should be open to everybody. And in fact, one of the ideas of FAME and the Philippine Association is to have more crisscrossing trips. So if you've not been to Hanoi, that's going to be one stop. You better be looking out for the announcement. So the idea is to maximize on the network. When you say connections, translation to me, network. The network is there. You don't know exactly what it's going to give you, but you know it gives you. And at a certain point in time, it all clicks together. So that's why I'm hopeful, because it's a step, it's a leap in faith. And this morning we had a leaders' assembly, and we disrupted the Philippine Association. because, and we're encouraged, we found that there's a great deal of resource out there that wasn't available to us under the traditional ways. So there was a disruption, and we think it's going to create more growth.
I think
How it goes will depend on the relationships. And so I'm encouraged by your talk. And we take up your offer that as far as executive education, we take you on the road, Richard.
yeah, I mean,
Three country chapters have told me this morning, how can we get more executive education aimed to our country?
I mean, the reality is, as I said earlier, because there's so much anxiety in the market, the demand for exec ed is very, very high. So our problem is really capacity in terms of how many experience. And by the way, I always tell people, I don't care if you're retired or not. What I care about is if you're relevant in 2019. And it's not going to be me who's going to decide if you're relevant. It's going to be the market that's going to decide if you're relevant. So in a way, exec ed is exposed to the market that way. So I'm willing to engage any adult who wants to be part of exec ed or join the team. And I don't really mind what the age is. But I do tell everybody, and I told this to Greg many times, is that it's a question of relevance. There's no way I'm going to put somebody in front of a client that cannot be relevant, because the reputation of every single person who carries the degree on their resume is going to be affected by that experience. So that's the downside. So I'll just have to deal with the personal cost of putting somebody out of an engagement, but I'm doing that to protect the brand of the institution. I'll just say this, two things I want to add. Number one, I think within the alumni, we really need to just be more open to one another. Okay? And it's because every batch thinks that they're the best batch at AIM. Okay? Can I just say that every single batch, regardless of program, believes that they're the best batch ever. And when they go to a homecoming, sometimes they get so excited about the fact that they think that they're the best that they actually tend to put some other people down. But with all due respect to everybody, having been here for 21 years and having met so many students and from so many different backgrounds and classes, I will say that everybody who came to AIM came with an open heart and with an authentic mission to be a better person and to make a change. So to judge anybody otherwise, I think, as a starting point, is not a good thing. You can judge them after you see their real colors. If they're really bad, then okay, you can judge them. But as a starting point, I think we just need to chill a little bit and say, hey, brother, I love you. What can we do together? Okay? Because in this world, look, we're AIM, we're family. Right? Hopefully, we realize that, yeah, okay, maybe I didn't spend that much time with my friends or whatever. But the reality is what really binds us is because we came on this campus, we came to this campus wanting to be a better version of ourselves, wanting to make a change in our organization. And I'm not saying that that's unique only to us, but I'm saying that everybody who came here felt that. Everybody who came here wanted that. So they just wanted a better life for themselves, for their family, for their community, for their employees. So I respect everybody who comes here. Okay? Even though it may not be easy always to deal with you, I respect everybody. And the second thing, if I can just the last one, this mindset of like being at a disadvantage.
I like the new Richard.
The mindset of being at a disadvantage. I've been here during the bad years of AIM, and there were a lot of decisions that were made from a position of being disadvantaged. To be honest, I'm not very tolerant about that attitude anymore, because I look at the whole network, the whole ecosystem, and I say there are a lot of advantages in this ecosystem. I don't know which disadvantage we're talking about. So let's not have so much envy about other people. Let's just have more appreciation of what's here. And if you're really envious so much about the others and you're not so happy about here, then there's always, you can always enroll. But if you're here, then let's make the most of it while we're still alive. Huh? That's what I said during the last time. while we still have breath in our lungs, let's make the most of it, right? Let's do it. It's our time. Let's do it. We waited for this time. What are we waiting for? Let's do it.
I think we end on a high note, not hopeful note. Yeah? Let's give Richard a
Ma'am, I'm sorry for using your example. Can we give Ma'am a round of applause, please? There you go.
Well, that concludes our half day. You feel you got something? Should we repeat this kind of thing? Okay. So thank you for your participation. May I request as many of us who participate in the homecoming night this Friday at the at Silo. It's at Millennial Place, somewhere in BGC. But it's good to reconnect with all ages, all degrees, all cultures. And finally, we would like to thank again our special sponsors, San Miguel Brewery. By the way, there's still some out there. Eurotel, Blue Coffee, and Carmen's Best. And of course, our greatest thanks go out to our co-presenters, the AIM Alumni Association Philippines, and the Federation AIM Alumni Associations, or FAME. Let's give them a round of applause. And with that, we bid you good night. Thank you. Okay, we want to have a photo of all the FAME heads here, and all the Alumni Association Philippines directors. Please come on stage.
Sa